Hello everyone, and welcome to Game 4 of the 2018 World Chess Championship match between Magnus Carlsen and Fabiano Caruana. The result is, well, the first three games were drawn, so the result is 1.5 each, 1.5 points each, and it will be interesting what will Carlsen do with the white pieces today. How will he look for his advantage? As so far the only real push for the win we've seen in Game 1 where Carlsen had the black pieces. So before we check out the actual game, we do have a fairly interesting story that is kind of going viral on the internet. Here you have a tweet by Tarjei Svensson. He said that he watched a video by St. Louis Chess Club this morning of Caruana doing preparations along Ramirez, Dominguez, and Cirila. Video is now removed, either a huge mistake or an intentional campaign to misinform Team Carlsen. Incredible. Well, basically, they've uploaded a 2-minute video on YouTube regarding some preparation Caruana's had, but in there you could easily see some games from ChessBase that might indicate on which preparation, on which openings or systems Caruana is preparing for. So now, although this is very unlikely, as I already mentioned on Twitter, you know, if an entire episode of if an entire season of Game of Thrones can be leaked, accidents do happen. But still, even if you see something going on in there, you see an opening you haven't prepared for or a system or something, you might just want to waste a little bit more of your time due to that. So if it was an intentional way to misinform Carlsen's team, it's actually not a bad move. But yeah, just wanted to mention that, and we do have a couple of nice photos, also compliments of Niki Riga. Before we check out the game, here we have a very nice photo and a very intriguing photo at that. Here you have Carlsen. He arrived. He shakes Fabiano Caruana's hand, and it's very interesting that Carlsen is standing while Caruana is sitting down. Now, if I'm sitting down somewhere and someone comes to my table and he wants to shake my hand, I will usually stand up. Doesn't have to be because it's polite or anything. It's simply this just looks weird. It's like a diagonal handshake. But okay, maybe it's just me. I don't know. Seems a bit off here. And here we have a very nice photo of Carlsen teasing Caruana that he might open with the Clemens opening h3 or perhaps even the Cadas opening h4. That is, of course, a joke. He's only, most likely centralizing his pawn, as none of the players will ever make their first move. Usually someone else will make the first move for them in this tournament, as it has been so far. Sorry about that. Here we have a photo of a woman making a first move for Carlsen. So I will also use this as a photo challenge. Who is the woman making the first move for Carlsen? There you have it, and also here is a very nice close-up of Magnus. The only reason I'm actually showing this is because it's just a very nice close-up, so I thought you might enjoy it. So there we have it. Now that we've seen that, let's check out the actual game. Like we already mentioned, Carlsen has the white pieces, and he opens with not anything to do with the h-pawn, but rather c4. So the English opening, it had to happen sometimes, as we are in London. Well, they are. Still hoping to see the London system, actually, and a great win in the London system. I actually wouldn't mind having a video called The London Immortal. But okay, we have e5, knight to c3, knight to f6, knight to f3, knight to c6, the 4 knights variation of the English. We have g3 by Carlsen, we have d5, this is still all standard, c captures on d5, knight captures on d5, and bishop to g2. Bishop to c5, a very nice square for the dark square bishop. We have castles, and the d3. So far, this is still also theory, and so far they've been following a game Caruana already played with the black pieces against Wesley So in the Grand Chess Tour Paris Blitz tournament in 2018. So Caruana even mentioned at the press conference that he knows that he already played this game, but he, like he says, he forgotten about it, but most likely Carlsen has it in his preparations. Rook e8, everything same as was played in that game between Wesley So and Fabiano Caruana. Bishop to d2, we have knight captures, bishop captures, and knight to d4. And this is a move where we have a new game on our hands. In that Wesley So versus Fabiano game, Wesley continued with rook to c1. That game was drawn, but for this game, Carlsen brings something new to the board. He plays b4. So what's happening here? Obviously, the bishop is under attack. You do have to move it somewhere. We have bishop to d6, getting it to safety, and also giving more protection to the e5 pawn. Rook to b1, and now comes knight captures on f3. Bishop captures on f3, and here we have a6. There was a lot of talk about that perhaps c6 could also have been played, but then they mentioned that b5 would be a very nice move for white. But it's actually a very nice idea. If you actually play b5 here, then after c captures on b5, rook captures on b5, and bishop to h3, attacking the white rook. Rook to e1, now you have rook to c8. This is a very cool thing for black here, because although white has this immense pressure against the b7 pawn, you still can't move it because the rook is stuck on a8. You can actually play rook to c8 and simply move it because the bishop on c3 is undefended. So after queen to a1 defending it, queen to c7 with a double attack against the bishop, and after the bishop is defended, now you actually play b6, and everything is all right here. Black has nothing to worry about. It would be actually a very nice position for black. But okay, you don't have to push b6 immediately after c6 is played, but also I thought it'd be a nice theme to show you. Maybe you will be able to use this if you will have a similar situation where your light square bishop is still undeveloped and your rook is stuck on a8, so perhaps in your own games white will have a bishop on c3 that you can use to get a tempo on with the rook. But okay, a6 was played in this game. We have a4 by Carlsen, and now comes c6. And here Carlsen proceeds with rook to e1. And again, there was a lot of talk about what if b5 is actually played here. And after a captures, pawn captures, bishop to d7. Judith Polgar mentioned this a few times. Then, let's say after pawn captures on c6, bishop captures on c6, bishop captures, pawn captures. Even though black's pawn structure is somewhat weakened, there is an isolated pawn on c6. Judith was convinced that black wouldn't have any problems here after the queen defends the pawn with queen d7, that the rook can even use this to go rook to e6 and perhaps rook to h6, or perhaps the rook can go somewhere else along the 6th rank, and even black can start an attack with h5 and h4. But Judith is a very aggressive player, so no doubt she would find some attacking ideas here. But okay, after c6, Carlsen does not go for the immediate b5. He plays rook to e1 and bishop to d7 now, enforcing the b5 square. We have e3 by Carlsen and queen to f6 now. We have bishop to e4. Now, this is a very nice central square for the bishop. Caruana just played queen to f6, so it is no longer to get this pawn to f5. Also, you did mention here that that a very nice move here might be just moving the queen back, queen to e6, and then preparing f5. But still, it's hard to decide how to do this. If white goes queen to h5, goes after the h7 pawn, now f5, bishop goes back to g2 or h1, well, or h1 or g2, then queen can come back to f6. But the problem is, although it is a very nice position for black, how will black take advantage of this? So far his bishop pair seems to be doing pretty much nothing, and it will be hard for black to break through the white's kingside here, as there's really no good square for the queen here if you want to keep the queens on the board. Here the queen is occupying the same square as the rook on e1. If you put the queen on f6 or something like this, then you will also get something like f4, as the bishop on c3 would make it impossible for black to actually capture here. And also I thought about an interesting move, queen to a2, going after the a4 pawn, and perhaps using this as a momentum to push f4 at some point, but it would be very hard if white simply defends a5. Now you will not be able to push f4 simply because bishop to e4 will be too devastating. Now after g6, you will simply be able to give up the bishop, as your dark square bishop, for example, is undefended on d6. King moves, queen captures, and the white will be winning here. Yeah, surely an interesting idea where a lot of moves different can be played differently for black. But here, bishop to f5. Fabiano decided to offer a trade of bishops. We have queen to f3, basically offering a queen trade, and Fabiano accepts it. We have bishop captures on e4, queen captures on f6, and in between move, pawn captures, and now finally b5 by Carlsen. We have rook to b1, bishop back to f8, we have pawn captures on b5, pawn captures on b5, and now king to g2. Carlsen starts improving the position of his king. We have rook e to d8, and now comes rook d to c1. As black has a weak backward c6 pawn, Carlsen will definitely enjoy taking advantage of this. We have king to g7, also black wants to improve the position of his king, maybe even come to g6 at some point. Bishop back to e1. White will always have to keep his dark square bishop here. He will have to defend this b4 pawn, as black will at some point attack it via rook to a4. We have rook d to c8, defending the pawn, but also hoping to maybe push c5 at some point and get rid of his weak backwards pawn. But when you push this pawn, then this pawn becomes weak, so there's really no way to ever do it. Rook to c2, and here we have rook to a4. Now the b4 pawn is attacked twice, and also it's attacked twice and defended twice. We have king to f3 by Carlsen, and here h5, not allowing Carlsen to perhaps take this moment to go king g4 to f5. f5 would be a very nice square for the king, but it's not, I mean, there's no move you can imagine black making that would allow this trip for the white king. But even if we do this, let's say, you know, just for laughs, that black would actually play bishop to e7, king goes here, black plays bishop back to f8, king goes here. There's not all that much the king can do here. For example, if h5 is played now, then the white king really has nowhere to go. It's like stuck on f5. So, okay, you don't have a light square bishop or a knight to do anything about this. But, you know, perhaps it would be very uncomfortable. Okay, after king to f3, we have h5. Caruana doesn't even allow Carlsen to think about this. We have king to e2, and now comes king to g6. Perhaps preparing to push f5 at some point, but Carlsen also, now that the king has moved from f3, will be thinking about pushing f4 at some point. We have h3, and now comes f5. Pawn captures on f5, king captures on f5, and now f3. So a very nice shield here against the black king, and now comes bishop to e7. We have e4 with check, king moves to e6, and now comes bishop to d2. We have bishop to d6, now preventing white from ever executing f4. And here rook b to c1 was played, and it was actually in this position on move 34 that the players agreed to a draw. It was actually Magnus Carlsen who offered a draw. There's, I mean, the engine's evaluation is that you know, it was a good call. That there's perhaps for general viewers it would be nice to play it out all the way to the end, because Carlsen has announced in the opening ceremony of the 2018 World Chess Championship match that he will push every game up until the end. But to 2,800 plus players, this makes very little sense, because the c6 pawn is attacked twice. If you defend it with the king, then comes rook a to d1. You can also defend the b pawn with rook to b1, but rook to d1 is also a very nice active defense now that the king is occupying the same file as the rook, and you will not be able to capture anything with the bishop, as this would be a very nice discovered check. So after king e7, white will simply move the rook back, attack the c6 pawn. And on the other hand, after rook b to c1, if you play something like bishop captures on b4, then you can go into this forced variation, bishop captures on b4, rook captures, and rook captures on c6 with check. Rook captures, and after the king moves, now comes rook to h6, attacking the h5 pawn, and it seems white is perhaps making some progress here, but rook to b2 check, and now after the king moves, rook to b3 check will force the white king back, as if the white king allows it, then black is actually the one that will be gobbling up all the pawns on the king's side, so white will just have to move back and forth, and again we will have a drawing sequence. So after rook beat to c1, the players, like we said, agreed to a draw on move 34. So it's not on move 30. I don't know if any of you know this, but if at least 30 moves have not been played, they're not allowed to agree to a draw. So at least 30 moves have to be played before they can agree to a draw. So 4 games played. We still have 8 more to go in the classical time format. Then we are entering rapid games. If also that will be drawn, then blitz games. And then in the end, I believe, I haven't checked, but I believe there is, of course, an Armageddon game. So yeah, I would also like to mention there have been a couple of funny moments in the press conference after this game, as the president of the Jamaican Chess Federation, Mark Holmes, he asked Fabiano if in game 5 he will play perhaps something different than e4, that it seems that Magnus already has gotten quite used to e4 and that he's perhaps getting too comfortable, which I mean, it was really funny, since obviously Caruana will not mention what he will play in the next game, in front of everyone, and especially in front of Magnus, as that would only ease his preparation. And also he mentioned that, this is too much draws, I want to see blood, sweat, and tears, and that is basically the reason why this video is called Blood, Sweat, and Tears. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Yakov Pichulov, David Compton, William Breadbanner, Daniel Whitehead, and William Avery for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, hopefully with some more interesting content. And of course, do share how are you enjoying the World Chess Championship 2018 so far. Thank you all, and I'll see you soon.